Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Horse Society. My name is Brad Lefkowits with an S, not a Z. I'm going to be talking today about creative rain capture in the residential garden. I'm a landscape designer by trade. My company is Waves Landscape Design, and by company I mean me. I'm a one-man show. I am a lifelong Californian, born in the Bay Area, went to school in Santa Barbara. Well, I was enrolled in school in Santa Barbara for a couple of years. Then I've been moved down to the San Diego area. Sorry, Mom. Moved down to the San Diego area in 2004, so I've been here just over 20 years. Currently living in Encinitas, as a lot of you know. You were at my house with my wife and 2 young kids. Studied landscape architecture at Miracosta College. I'm sure many of you know the program there. Wonderful art department. Once my kids are a little bigger, I'm going to go back and take some classes just for fun. They have such a great array of classes. So for the hobbyists, the amateur, the professional, they have a really diverse array of classes, wonderful staff. It's a great campus. It's a lot of fun up there. For relevant today, I was certified in water harvesting through the San Diego Sustainable Living Institute. I'm hoping all of this adds up to make me the second most famous Brad L in water harvesting. A little bit of acknowledgments off the top. This book I recommend it to almost every client I've ever come across, The California Watershed Approach to Landscape Design, done by Pamela Bursler. Available for free at greengartensgroup.com. They also have one specific to the San Diego area, Inland Empire. Wonderful. I refer to it as the single best resource. If you have one thing to show you how to apply some of these forward-thinking ideas to the landscape, it's all in there. It's probably 10 years old now, but best practices are still very relevant. Previously mentioned Brad Lancaster. He has a great TED Talk. He's based out of Tucson. He has a bunch of books, a lot of great stuff online. His TED Talk is really good. What they do in Tucson is a little bit different because they can have those summer monsoonal storms, so the groundwater gets replenished a little more often than we can rely on here. We'll get the occasional summer storm, but not so much. But the basic principles of keeping your water on the property, contouring the earth to keep your water. He has a lot of great content on there. Locally, my number one homegirl, Brooke Carson at Catching H2O. She's the one that taught the class I took in water harvesting. Her company, I just checked in with her yesterday to see, try to get a number. Her company in the last 3 years has diverted 1.3 million gallons of water that otherwise would have been heading to the storm drain, heading to the sewer. They do laundry, landscape, shower, Greywater, cistern installation. She is the one to talk to. CatchingH2O.com. It's hard to find contractors in the area that can install a cistern properly. She will do a great job from big to small, help you do all the math, and she's a great resource and a great friend. A couple other acknowledgments. There's the people up in LA. Marilee Kuhlman gave a talk from the Urban Water Group. I saw her speak 7 years ago, and that was something that really opened my mind and excited me about some of these things we're going to be talking about today. Shawn Maestretti at Studio Petrichor, based in kind of eastern LA. He's very much on the permaculture side of these things. A lot of great content that he puts out. I've done some workshops with him. They'll do community-based workshops where you can go up to LA and do a hugelkultur, install a cistern or something like that. Greywater Corps, also in Los Angeles, they have a great Instagram page. I borrowed some of their images today with permission. They do all of these things we're going to be talking about. They install those. They've been a good friend and a good resource as well. Of course, all my colleagues in APLD San Diego, we have a great network of designers where we can share our trials and successes and failures in some of these adventures. And last but not least, my mom, who's here. Hi, Mom. I refer to myself as a second-generation APLD member often because she was one of the founding members up in the Bay Area. So I got to grow up around design. I took a very circuitous route through life to come back to it, but I made it, and she's been a great resource to help me through all this stuff. So I want to start out with a little bit of why. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but for me, it's important to kind of set the scene. Why should we capture rainwater? Low average rainfall means water is a precious resource, right? We don't get a lot of it. So what we do get, what does fall on our property, we should think about ways to keep it. Most landscape projects, if you're doing a larger overhaul and having a crew in, you're going to be spending some amount of money on moving water around your property. Most of the time, that's going to be digging a trench, putting in a drain line. So you're spending that money. That trench, the labor to dig that trench costs money. That pipe you're putting in that trench costs money. You're spending that money anyways. I think on most projects, it's at least worth thinking about. Let's pause. Let's think about how much this line item is. Can we spend that in a slightly different way with a little bit of thinking to maybe keep some of that water then, rather than just the conventional way of just get it away from the foundation, get it away from the property ASAP. Stormwater management on that front, that's another reason to do it. The property that maybe some of you saw in Leucadia on Hymettus, where it was the backyard, where it had a swale and a couple of bridges, we'll see some pictures later. They're the lowest point around. As many of you know, there are no storm drains in Leucadia. They are lower than all their neighbors. They're lower than the street. There's a ton of water there. So in some of these big events we've had, we haven't been able to manage all the water on that property, but in your average rainfall, now we're putting that water in a place we want it to be with intention. We're putting it in the ground with some design, some thought put into it, so we can manage some of that storm water for them. Plants love rainwater. This is the first time I've used ChatGPT. You get 2 free images. I put in give me a picture of a happy plant. It gave me one. I said, make it happier, and that's what we got. So plants love rainwater. We know all of our city water. I know some of us are on wells, but a lot of us aren't. The city water that's coming in, piped in from far away, is very mineral heavy. Rainwater is a great way to flush out some of those minerals, particularly our avocados that get that salt burn. It'll greatly beneficial to flush it out with the rainwater. Something that maybe not a lot of people think about, it costs a ton of money to pump water around the state of California. These are the pipelines you probably recognize snaking up next to the Grapevine, the State Water Project. Single largest user of electricity in the state of California. So when I'm walking down the street and I see someone watering their front lawn and they're overwatering and it's flowing over to the sidewalk, I think about how far that water traveled, how much money and energy and the carbon footprint that it took to get that water down here, and they're just dumping it on a lawn that doesn't get used and it's overflowing to the sidewalk. Drives me nuts. Lastly, it's really cool to capture rainwater. It opens up when you think about these new ideas, particularly with topography in the land. I think it's really cool and opens up some really fun possibilities for ways to design around and have this in mind. Now, inevitably, so very early on in my career, I was exposed to these ideas and I was very passionate about them. And every single design project I went on, every contractor I ever talked to, I was singing rainwater capture from the rooftops, saying we have to do it. And I was over designing complicated and expensive rainwater capture solutions for every client. And inevitably, when you're preaching this all the time, you're going to get pushback. So many times, I would hear some version of, well, why would we spend this money? It never rains here. And that makes me so angry, okay? For a couple of reasons. Number one, exactly, it doesn't rain here that much, so why would we waste that little bit of precious water that we get? Number two, it does actually rain here, right? So this, I know from the coast to the inland, south to north, there's a lot of different average rainfalls, but for the purpose of conversation, these numbers are from Lindbergh Field, average of 10 inches a year. We have some particularly dry years of 3 inches, 5 inches, lately we've had some wetter years. If you look at this in context of the rest of the country, we are on the low end. We're on par with Tucson and Phoenix, which if you think about those, you think about the desert, parched dry desert. Even Los Angeles at 14 inches, it doesn't sound like a lot more, but that's 40% more rainwater. San Francisco, twice as much. Portland, Seattle, 4 times as much. And I think particularly for me as a designer, I like keeping these numbers in mind because a lot of times someone's calling me because they just bought a house. Sometimes they just bought a house because they moved here from another part of the country. I had some clients from Bellingham that when I was talking about the different line items that are going to show up in their bid, they said, what's irrigation? They had been growing, a veritable food forest in Bellingham, just relying on the water that falls from the sky, right? So people come from other parts of the country where they can plant kind of whatever they want, and it's just going to get irrigated from their natural rainfall. So I think it's important to keep this in mind. That 10-inch number is a nice number for some of the math we're going to get into, and even those lower numbers, driest years we get 3 inches of rain, all right? So now we're going to talk about how much that can actually generate on a property. It never rains here, right? But for hopefully some of you know this. If you don't, learn it, commit it to memory. For every 1,000 square feet of roof, 1 inch of rain will generate 600 gallons of runoff. All right, 1,000 square feet of roof, 1 inch of rain, 600 gallons. My roof is 2,100 square feet. I'm going to show you a really easy way to figure that out. So Google Earth, it's a free app. There's my house. Fortunate for this purpose, I have a very relatively simple roof line, no overhead trees that are obstructing the view. If you go to Google Earth, click on that ruler, which the zoom menu is blocking, but there's a ruler on the top that opens up this window here, 3D polygon. You click around, I clicked on the corners and the apexes of the roof, bada bing, bada boom, 5 seconds, 2,107.88 square feet. Do you need to be exact? No. We're going to go through some math here, and at the end of it, I'm going to tell you why math doesn't matter, okay? I know some people are math averse, their brain starts to shut down. Stick with me for a minute. I'm going to explain why it doesn't matter at all. So 2,100 square feet of roof. In 1 inch of rain, my roof line will generate 1,260 gallons of water. In an average year, 10 inches of rain, 12,600 gallons of water, okay? Even in a dry year, which are few and far between, if you look back at the data, 3 inches, that's about as low as it's going to get, 3,780 gallons of water. Okay, so my point why the math doesn't matter here, it's not a question of how much water your property generates. It's almost never a question of how much water your property generates. It's a question of how much space you have to store it. How much space in your garden are you willing to give up? How much money are you willing to invest in it? Because no matter what you do, it's gonna fill up. You do a 5,000 gallon cistern, there's gonna be years where it fills up and overflows, right? And part of this, I have a couple axes to grind today. The first one is gonna be, we need to be done with 50-gallon rain barrels, okay? They've been subsidized. I know some of you have them. They've been free, heavily subsidized. It is such a small amount of water, such a waste of plastic, right? And particularly if you look at this 205-gallon cistern, with only 13-inch wider of a footprint, 13-inch more of a footprint, you get 4 times the storage. All right, 200 gallons versus 50 gallons. That, to me, this 200-gallon cistern should be a starting point. I've tried to reach out to people with SoCal Water Smart in the state and sent complaints in different ways and voiced some concerns. My real problem with a 50-gallon rain barrel is number of times, friends, clients, they say, oh, I got my free 50-gallon rain barrel. I put it on a downspout. First rain, it fills up how fast? It fills up like that. They didn't put the thought in. Nobody talked to them about overflow or how to connect it properly. So it filled up and started overflowing within 3 minutes in November. And now it's overflowing next to their foundation. And they have 50 gallons of water that they're not going to use for 5 months. And when they do use it in 5 months, 50 gallons isn't a lot. It's, you know, I know there's people that have made this work, but we need to start thinking bigger. I think 10 plus years of the amount of money, you know, we say free rain barrel, it's not free, somebody paid for it. You know, your water rates, your taxes, I don't know who's paying for it, somebody is. You think back, if all of those instead of 50 gallons have been 200 gallons, that would have been 4 times the amount of storage. And again, we think back to the math we just did, thousands of gallons that you can generate from a property. 200 gallons should be the absolute bare minimum. So what do people do? They have their 50-gallon rain barrel. They realize it fills up so fast, so what do? They get more of them, and they tie them together. I grabbed this off the internet. I could have used multiple client visit pictures that I've taken. I didn't want to put any on blast here, so I just Googled rain barrels chained together. 12 rain barrels there, 600 gallons, 12 connection ports at the bottom, which if you are able to set those up just right, probably a plumber did that one, that's pretty clean. If you're able to set those up just right, they'll work for a while. Is that going to be watertight 3 years from now, 5 years from now? No. All those little spigots are pretty cheap, they break. This is a really frustrating system to set up and a really frustrating system to use, particularly when you think about a slimline cistern, 25 inches deep, 7 feet wide, 7 feet tall, 530 gallons, right? And it looks like in that picture on the left, you could fit definitely 2, maybe 3 of them. Way, way, way more storage. There's better ways to do this, all right? So if we're gonna do it the right way, this is an image from Brooke at Catching H2O. It's all about input and output, right? This is an image you can find online. You can look back at YouTube. It's all about input and output. Input here, we have a leaf feeder under the gutter, $60 product on Amazon. Very easy to install. Depending on kind of what overhead trees you have, you'll need to clear it out multiple times a winter, but pretty easy. You just reach up there with a rake or a ladder. That keeps debris out of your system, and it's always going to be about the output overflow. You know, different size cisterns, they're all going to fill up, right? So if there's another thing you take away from today, it's all about overflow, 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 because you want to know when that system fills up. We've had these huge storms lately, right? So your system's going to fill up, and when it does, it's going to overflow. And you want to know where it's going to overflow because you don't want to be surprised, all right? With some simple concepts that hopefully you'll have a good grasp of by the end of the day, you're going to know where the lowest point in your system is, where that water is going to go, and I want that to be your decision. I don't want it to be a surprise. We don't want to go in the crawl space, in the garage, in the kitchen, into the neighbor's property. We want to control where it is. So overflow is so important when we talk about this stuff. This picture that I'm showing you now, this is my favorite picture I've come across when we're talking about cistern capture, because there's so much in this one simple picture. All right, some of you look at this, you already understand what's going on, but let's talk through it. First off, we have the input. Coming in from the gutter, we have our leaf feeder up there. At the end of the line, we have the overflow, right? But what's really, really important, and what I'm hoping is thought-provoking and exciting to some of you here, is this section in the middle, okay? Again, some of you already understand what's happening here by experience, some of you don't. And also by experience, by the end of this, about half of you that don't understand will understand. So think about what's going to happen with the water here, right? It's going to go in the input, it's going to travel in that pipe. When it goes underground in that pipe there, now it's going to start to fill up and rise together. Now, some of you are thinking, what about the pressure that's going to push it back out the leaf heater? There's no pressure, all right? Gravity. Water finds its level through the magic of, well, physics are the opposite of magic. Through physics, water is just going to find its lowest point and start rising. And because that point where it goes into the cistern is lower than the point where it enters this pipe, the water will find its way into the cistern before it goes anywhere else, right? And if you look really closely, the overflow is just a little bit lower than the input point. So when that cistern fills up, it's going to overflow into that overflow pipe. And knowing these guys, this is Greywater Corps up in LA, that's probably going to a swale, a fruit tree orchard, or maybe even a larger cistern at the far end of the property. Now, if you understand this concept of what's happening under that pathway there, this is mid-construction. It looks like they're going to put that pathway back together. But if you understand what's happening underground there, now think about it. That 8-foot pipe, let's call it 8 feet, that can be 100 feet, it can be 1,000 feet. It can zig and zag, go up and down. As long as no point in that pipe is higher than either the input or the output point of that pipe, you can move water all over your property, no pumps required. Simply water finding its level, finding the lowest point. There is, if you have a big section of roof going into that pipe, you do have to pay some attention to how much water is entering that pipe at once, but these are big 3-inch pipes, they can handle a lot. So again, if you understand what's happening in that middle section there, now whether that's going to a cistern, a big cistern, or a swale, just with gravity, knowing that water is going to find its lowest point, opens up a world of possibilities for us. Now we know we can do big cisterns, right? Because we're moving water far away. This is a project I was on with Brooke, kind of in the PB La Jolla border there. I want to call that maybe a 4,000-gallon tank. They're massive, show up in a big truck. We rolled it. She always calls me on the jobs where they need some extra power that get some big tanks through an awkward situation. I've kind of learned to maybe ignore her calls now and certain things. But I think it was a pad for a hot tub. This is a big property. So this is one where maybe the math it pays a little more importance because there was a lot of room in this property for a lot of storage. Big property, a lot of roof line. This was a lot lower than the house. So again, just with gravity, we're able to fill that tank up from the roof line from a downspout, put it in there. So we know we can do big cisterns. We know in a small side yard, we can do those slimline cisterns. There's 1,000 gallons of storage, and maybe that's a 5-foot setback. There's room for 1,000 gallons and room to walk by, maybe get a wheelbarrow by there too. So we know we can do slimlines. We know we can capture way more water than you may originally think. Again, because that point in that picture on the right, the water going into the cistern is lower than the roof line. Water's getting into the cistern. Those 2 cisterns there, they're tied together. That's probably 3,000 gallons of storage that they're going to use to grow their veggies. The aesthetics are not for everyone. I get it. This one I don't hate. I kind of like that. It's a nice modern garden. Those slimline tanks, nice dark green against a dark fence. Personally, I don't hate that. Those plants in front of it are going to grow. But fine, it's not for everybody. Usually the husband is like, I don't want to look at that ugly thing. That's fine, we'll hide it for you, okay? The picture on the left shows some plants growing in. You can hide it behind some plants. Where's the cistern on the right? I don't know, it's hiding behind some passion vine, okay? So if the deal breaker here for you is aesthetics, there's solutions for that as well. Build a fence, grow a vine on it. Again, I'm hoping people can think bigger than we've done so far. Inevitably, could do a whole nother talk on how to use the water once it's in the cistern, but really quickly just to talk about the options. The easiest way, all these have a hose attachment on the bottom. You plug in the hose, you open the valve, move the hose around the garden as you're working on the weekend, move it from plant to plant. Slightly more advanced than that, but still pretty simple, would be what we call a branched drain system. So in each one of these green irrigation boxes, there's a 1/2-inch ball valve. There you can see the 1/2-inch line running down. Each one goes into a box. You have a 1/2-inch ball valve that you can kind of crank open to manually adjust how much water each one is getting. Usually the one closest to the cistern is going to be cracked open just a little bit. The one farthest away be open a little bit more. Those holes are going to be filled in with mulch, and depending on what you're irrigating, you can kind of devised various systems of that. You do really need to pay attention to the level and the relation of these things to each other, because if one of them's way higher and one lower, it's going to throw things off. So that's another way to do this. And then, of course, if you want to get pumps involved, opens up a world of possibilities at a significant investment, but then you're just running a traditional irrigation system. Our Hunter timers, our ratio timers, most of them have a pump setting, so you can tell it, hey, when you turn on zone 1, turn on the pump. And if you want to get a pump involved to a large cistern device, then world's your oyster. A lot of possibilities, but again, significant cost. So that's cisterns, right? I think most of us are familiar with that concept. That's a quick run through them. The next thing I want to talk about is earthworks. This is swales, dry creek beds, berms, grading. Okay, and these are big projects, especially like at my house, if you're going to tie these different ideas together. They're significant projects, right? This is my house before we started. Big projects are big projects. The previous owner had taken out a bunch of ficus. There was one sad melaleuca. When we bought the property, I took it out on day 1. But everywhere we put a shovel in the ground, there was roots the size of my leg or bigger. So even though we didn't have a lot of demo in the just traditional sense of old patios, there was a rotting deck we threw away, but there was no big patios. There's a retaining wall in the far corner that was falling over, but we didn't have a lot of, if you looked at it, you wouldn't have seen a lot of demo, but because we wanted to get grade down 3 inches below stucco screed, because I was going to be doing these big swales, because everywhere you put a shovel in the ground was a root that was going to make it really hard to plant, we spent a lot of time and an unfortunate amount of money just sending stuff away to reset the scene. So I don't want to give anyone the false hope that these things are easy to do. Hopefully, I'm going to be talking about some big ideas today, and there's some ways to reverse engineer some of these ideas at a smaller scale into your property. But a lot of times, if you're talking about a really complicated system like what's at my house, it's a really big project, and I don't want to gloss that over. But this is the end result, right? If you have a design, if you have a thoughtful goal you're working towards, every move we made from that before, everything was on paper, not quite as detailed as I do for clients because a lot of it was in my mind and I was there on site every day. But when you have a design, you know what you're working towards. Every move we made towards this was efficient. You know that every trench you're digging, every delivery you're getting, you're coordinating in the scope of the whole project, and you can achieve some really, really big things. So at my house, the first thing I want to run through in depth is the sunken lawn in the front. On the left, you'll see the plan view, bird's eye view. The black circle on the top is where the camera person's standing. Green triangle represents the angle. Looking out, if you look closely, you'll see Darth Vader. You'll see my dog lying on the boardwalk. I'm going to run through this a couple different ways quickly, and hopefully it all adds up to making sense. So if you look on the plan view, you see that blue circle number 2. That's where water is coming from the gutter into a downspout, goes underground, under my dog there, under the boardwalk, and comes out in a pipe in the side of the wall of the sunken lawn. When that sunken lawn fills up, it overflows through a notch in the concrete and through some fixtures in the wall. You'll see the picture in the middle there. I learned that's called a scupper, a brass fixture. So the system overflows through the retaining walls through those fixtures there. Let's look at that another way. So this is Google Earth. This is the section of roof that gets diverted into the sunken lawn. 375 square feet. So in 1 inch of rain, that's going to generate 225 gallons. It travels down a downspout, through a pipe to the sunken lawn. The sunken lawn is 90 square feet by 9 inches deep, so that's 67.5 cubic feet. 67.5 cubic feet is 504 gallons. So that's how much water my sunken lawn can hold, and it's going to, you do some more math, it's going to be 2.25 inches of rain to make that sunken lawn overflow. Don't worry, this is not a high school math test. You're allowed to cheat. You can do all this math on Google. You want to find cubic feet, Google cubic foot calculator. You want to do cubic feet to gallons, type into Google, cubic feet to gallons, all right? I don't have these memorized. Every time I do it, I just double check it on Google. So 2.25 inches of rain for that to overflow is a lot. Lately, we've gotten some storms that are that big. So it either takes a really big storm or it takes a succession of storms where the storefronts are rolling in every week. The groundwater is super saturated. There's some standing water left over. The next storm kicks it up. And that's great. I don't want it to overflow every single time it rains. It's a special occasion. Most of the time, most of our average storms, that sunken lawn is going to keep all that water, and that's what I want. It's kind of a fun thing when the scuppers overflow. Here's another way to look at it. This is section cut, an elevation view, right? So you can see the downspout on the left, the street level on the right. Here's how the water is going to move through it, right? Down the downspout, into a pipe under the walkway, goes into the sunken lawn. The sunken lawn overflows into a little catchment drain, travels down through scupper number 1 to another small swale in between my retaining walls, which has a drain that takes it to scupper number 2, which flows, get a little bit of water capture in the last bit of landscape before it flows out over the sidewalk. Now this was a big idea. I knew it was going to work, but it was certainly something where the people building it for me were kind of scratching their heads going, okay, dude, like whatever you say. But I say, no, trust me, it's all going to work. And it did, and it was really fun. So here we're going to run through it. Okay, so there's a sunken lawn full. And you can see, we're going to zoom in here, sunken lawn filled up during a big storm. This is the notch in the concrete I mentioned. That's the overflow point for my sunken lawn. There's a drain under those rocks there, so the sunken lawn overflows into the drain. Then we're going to come around here and look at that scupper in 1 second. And so the scupper that we're going to see is the overflow from the sunken lawn that's overflowing out of the wall. It fills up another small swale here. You'll see a drain hiding in the Artemisia if you look close. That drain just connects right down to the next scupper. So that's the last point where it comes out, get a little bit of capture in the garden. There's a native clinopodium that I like a lot before it flows out into the sidewalk. So it worked. It took some troubleshooting, which I won't get into now, but we got it worked and dialed in, and it's super cool. It's a great function. It's a great feature. But was it a small project? No. Was it easy for me to conceptualize? Yes. Was it easy to build? Absolutely not. Total disaster. We had to blow up the whole property, build our retaining walls. That pile of dirt you see on the left picture was a lot of the soil that was coming out from the backyard. We were piling soil up faster than we could get it out of the way. Massive, massive projects. Here's in progress. On the far left, you can see the day we poured the concrete. The blue coating, if you're wondering, is a product called Top Cast. Purely an aesthetic decision. You spray that cream on the concrete the day it's poured. You wash it off. It does a nice exposed aggregate finish. In the middle picture, if you look closely, you can see a little pipe sticking out of the wall. That's before I cut it flush. And then you can also see the input point of that pipe there. So this was before we did our stucco, before we did our gutters, but because I had it on paper, because I had it in the design, because I knew how this was all going to work, you set the scene so that everything can come together in the end. And it's usually that last 2% of the project where everything finally comes together. But again, so that's the pipe before I cut it down. It catches the water from the downspout, and that's where it comes out into the sunken lawn. And it has been really great. This is planting day. Carex pragracillus, native Carex pragracillus. That was the first day we got our dog, and the first thing she did was go and roll around on the grass, the plugs we had just planted. But boy, has it worked out great, right? This native Carex pragracillus, I have put it through its paces. It's been underwater for months at a time during the winter. I mow it, not at the times you're supposed to mow it. It just keeps on coming back stronger and stronger. I've grown to kind of now my preference is the long look on the left. But my real goal with all this, that I'm sure I've told some people in this room before, is that hopefully we get another summer tropical storm hurricane, because my real goal is to have the lawn mowed and nice and clean, have this filled up when it's not too cold out, and get a picture of my kids snorkeling in the sunken lawn. We live in a world of content creation, for better or worse, and that would get a lot of likes on Instagram. So that's my real goal here. So that's the sunken lawn in the front. Hopefully breaking that down with a couple different views there help some people understand. So now let's look at the property as a whole. We already know, so this would be the conventional approach, right? Big drain lines down the side yards, get the downspouts, get all the drains in the garden connected to those drains in the side yards, get it out to the street ASAP. But that's not what we want to do. We want to take the watershed approach and keep our water. So we already know we're diverting that section of roof to the sunken lawn. For this huge section of roof, again, instead of sending it out to the street, that 1,000 square feet of roof, I'm going to circle it around the property and through some swales that some of you saw where our tadpoles were hanging out during the tour a couple months ago. So here's how we do it. Here we're rotating 90 degrees clockwise. So big section of roof there goes into a cistern, my 530-gallon slimline cistern that I have on the side. When that cistern fills up, it overflows underground to the swale. That swale number 1 is going to fill up, connected to swale number 2 through a simple pipe that I'm going to illustrate in a second. Swale number 2 fills up, hits the drain, drains out under the side yard, picks up our outdoor shower and the hand washing station for my wife's piano students on its way out to the street, where there's one last swale, of course, smaller swale before it overflows onto the sidewalk. So here it is in reality. 530-gallon slimline cistern. You can see the overflow pipe coming down on the right. That goes underground, comes out under the papyrus. Oh my God, papyrus, it's going to take over. I've had this for 3 years. Little Prince, it's been fine. So I don't know. A lot of people try to steer me away from it, but it's been great. It can be underwater. It's been pretty dry this summer. It's doing awesome. So now we're looking, the papyrus is behind us, and we're looking towards my office. Got some little cork boats floating along in the swale there. So swale number 1 here connects to swale number 2. This is in front of my office, and with a simple pipe coming up underground. And if you're wondering what that might look like, here's what it looked like on construction day. So closest to you in the foreground is a pipe at the end of swale number 1. On the far end is a pipe that comes up in swale number 2. And again, because I had all this in my head and on paper of how it was going to work out, we know to dig that big old trench, put that pipe in there, and it's all going to work out in the end because we've measured everything. And here's how that works. Another illustration of a relatively simple concept that, in my experience, not everyone quite understands. So the 2 big empty rectangles represent swale number 1, swale number 2. Coming in on the left is our input, our overflow from that 530-gallon cistern. So when that 530-gallon cistern fills up, water that's falling on that big section roof is going to go into that swale. When water fills up past the 2 pipes, now those 2 swales, higher than the 2 pipes, those 2 swales are now equalized. So water will rise and fall together. Those 2 swales are equalized. Once it fills up to the point of the drain line, now it's going to overflow down into that drain pipe out to the street. In a particularly dry year, if I want to get just a little bit more water capture out of the system, I put a coupler on that drain line, raise it up a couple inches across those 2 swales. I haven't done the exact math, definitely a couple hundred gallons, maybe 1,000 gallons. They're 2 big swales, so you raise 2-3 inches of water across all that square feet. That's a lot more water. Here's what that coupler looks like. So on the left is where my drain normally sits. That's where it is today. You can see the concrete patio in the background. I don't want water higher than that. On the right, I've put my little MacGyver coupler that's glued on the inside. Pop it on there. That raises, I don't know, call that 3-4 inches, and you can see it's just below the concrete. And all I had to do was that simple little step. So that gives me 4 more inches of water capture across those 2 swales. There's different ways I'm applying this now. Won't get into it, but this simple concept of your overflow point, this is the most important part in my whole garden. All the drainage in my garden relies on this. So it's right outside my office. It's pretty easy to maintain. Very simple concept. So I like big swales. I like to go big. This is the project on Hymettus in Leucadia that some of you may have visited on the tour. When you build swales, you get to build bridges, and every garden needs a bridge. We have 2 on this one, a boulder bridge, which obviously the kids love, and a traditional cedar bridge in the back. This property is great because the soil is so sandy there. We put a lot of water into that swale, and it disappears amazingly fast. I'm jealous. At my house, it sticks around a lot longer. I think that's why the Lamandra has done well there. Again, big projects. Here's a construction project just for fun when we put the boulder bridge in. And as we know, on day 1 of a new garden, your plants are small. It's not the most exciting. But with some thought and with doing all this with intention, it turns into something pretty cool, right? So that was how it looked. That was taken during the garden tour. Again, I don't know. I should put a Lamandra in the bottom of my swale, see how it does. I'm pretty sure they're doing so well here because that soil is so sandy. But boy, they have done really, really well. The trees around here, the roots are finding that water that we're putting into the ground. That's another great benefit of doing this kind of thing. Here's a project in Carlsbad. I really like this entryway. I call it the upcycled entryway. The owner had built a bridge at their previous garden, their previous home, and it was sitting in their side yard next to these pavers that were buried under some junk. So we repurposed that into an entryway. Another massively deep swale, planted up with crazy natives. That's what they want. That's what they got. It looks super cool. More Carex praguesulis is going to go wild and fill in some spaces in there. Ton of water. This is just getting fed through their driveway. I should have put an image together for that, but basically their driveway has like a little low point in the middle of it that just feeds into it right here. So that's just surface draining over their driveway. The gutters dump onto the driveway, the downspout dumps onto the driveway, and it fills that swale, working its way towards a drain in the far corner of the property. And of course, the bridge is guarded by a little Santa Christmas gnome. So I like big swales with standing water. So now everyone's wondering, what do you do about mosquitoes? First, most of our rain comes in the colder months where it's not as much of a concern. But at my house, these years we've gotten tons of rain, that water sticking around. As soon as the weather starts to warm up, I use that product on the left, mosquito bits, toss some of them in there. I've had no issues with mosquitoes when we've had standing water. On the right is a pump I also have. It's $100 on Amazon. Some pump, you just drop it into the bottom of the swale. When we got that big August storm a couple of years ago, dropped that pump in, just pumped it out into the garden, so I didn't have any water sitting around in the warmer months. So those are two easy solutions. If you think back to that drain concept too, there's a way to set it up so that you have the option to pop off the drain line and have it drain from the lowest point of the swale, which I'm now designing into gardens, but there's solutions. We have not had problems with mosquitoes. We get more bites during the summer when the swales are bone dry, but even our low water lawn that gets watered regularly, I think we're getting more bites on that than we've ever gotten because of what's going on in the swales. But you don't have to go deep. You can do a dry creek bed. This is my version of a dry creek bed that we did in Village Park. This brings me my last axe to grind today. We're all familiar with dry creek beds, right? But I drive around and it's another thing I see that kind of drives me crazy. Because number one, is there an input point? Are we diverting a downspout to the top of that dry creek bed? Is it just there? I mean, they're beautiful. I love the look. I love rocks. I love the look of a dry creek bed. But are we going to put all that work into it and not actually make it functional? Seems like a real missed opportunity when I see this. So number one, is there a downspout diverted to the top of that dry creek bed? If there is, great. But when it's just this gentle slope, it really just turns into a water slide to take water off the property. Yes, on day one, first year, those nooks and crannies between the rocks will capture, slow, and sink some water. But over time, it'll silt up with debris. The rocks will settle in a little bit. And it basically is just a beautiful water slide to take water off your property. And that makes Michael Jordan sad. With just a little bit more thought and not any more investment, just the understanding of these concepts, this is what you would ideally do with a dry creek bed. You want to create flat sections and check dams represented by these boulder graphics in here. And what this allows us to do, and we have flat sections, long or short, is that you have your gutter or your downspout directed into the top of it. That first section will fill up a little bit before it overflows to the second section, so on to the third section. And now that water, a couple inches of water, you can really control that. You can have it be an inch, you can have it be 5 inches. Now it's stopped and it has a chance to sink down and replenish your groundwater, and that makes us happy. All right, so this is not a much bigger, if any, bigger investment between constructing these two things. And this is absolutely something you could retrofit pretty easily into a garden. You need a crew out there for a day or a couple days, take the dry creek bed apart, regrade it, create some flat sections so that water has a chance to stop and sink into the soil. So my version of how I did that, and this one we were just looking at, you can see these cobbles kind of snake back and forth across the swale. Each time it crosses over the swale here, that's my check dam. So these rocks are piled up just a little bit higher than the next time it crosses over before. So you can see water now, not a lot, we didn't go crazy here, has a chance to slow and sink into the ground. As all these plants grow, the roots grow, it's gonna suck up that water even faster. Here's around the corner looking at the same thing. Each time that those rocks snake across the swale, it's a chance to stop that water and sink it into the ground. This is my colleague, Andrea. You can have fun with these. She's my design bestie. She's down in San Diego. These are her purple fish that she put in her water feature. They look cool year round. When you get a big rain, now her fish are swimming. Super fun. How fun is that, right? This is just to kind of touch on another fun thing. This is the mud kitchen that I saw at my house. My kids play in it. It overflows. This is just hooked up to the same main line that our hoses are hooked up to. They play in the sink, they make waterfalls, they fill it up, they pull the drain, they do little boats and things in there. It overflows or it drains out of the sink just into that swale that's in front of my office. Every time I've seen a treehouse at a client's garden, 99 times out of 100 say, man, I built this treehouse and the kids played in it for one day and I never went up there again. The mud kitchen has been a smashing success just to this day. Still to this day. Every kid that comes over, you can't pull them away from it. My kids still play out there. They're getting older. I don't know how much time we have left of it, but it's been a real fun thing. It's helped create a connection between them and the garden, them playing in the mud kitchen, waters the plants below. It's been really fun. When we had the tadpoles, like, you guys better go play in that mud kitchen so the tadpoles don't dry out. And it's been really fun. Kids love playing with water. And that's really what it's all about for me, right? On the left is the first time the swales were filling up. The kids throw on the rain boots, splash around. Here's my son and my nephew with another cork boat in a swale in front of the fireplace. They absolutely love it. Here is in the sunken lawn, when it fills up, we get the remote controlled boat out, drive the remote controlled boat around in the sunken lawn. This was when we got that August tropical storm / hurricane. It was nice and warm out, and my youngest son went to go for a swim in the backyard swale. How many kids can say they do that in Southern California? They went for a swim in their natural water feature in the backyard. Again, these are going to be special occasions, but he was stoked, of course. And that's what it's about for me. It's about thinking forward. It's about the future. It's about showing my kids that we can approach our work and our gardens creatively and have fun with it. And I think that's all I got. So that's my talk on creative water capture. You can reach me there, brad@waveslandscapedesign.com. I have cards in the front, and I love doing consults and talking about these things at your property. Definitely time for questions. Yeah.
The water containers, or whatever you call them, are made of some kind of plastic, something or another.
Yep.
What's the lifespan of those?
I can't answer that with certainty, but I will say that the bigger, beefier ones are going to last a really long time. I think the main problem with the rain barrels, the 50-gallon rain barrels, is those little connection ports, the things on the bottom. They're just not industrial quality. So you got 5 years, 10 years out of them before they start leaking if you're lucky. These big ones, the plastic is a lot thicker. They're heavy. They're heavy duty. So I don't know what they're rated for.
And I've had play school toys, which are made out of plastic. And sometimes, depending on where I've lived, they've lasted like 10 to 15 years. But then at some point, they crack open.
Yeah, I can't give you an answer with certainty on those, but they're industrial quality, so I think they'll last a long time. Yes, in the back.
My 2 cents is we've had our big tanks, both 1,200 gallon and 2 500s, probably for at least 15 years, and they still are 100%.
Awesome, love it.
Could you tell the Zoom people what you just said?
Oh yeah, so the question is about the longevity of tanks, and the gentleman in the back just said they've had a large system installed for 15 years, and everything's still going strong. Yeah, in the front.
Question and then a possible fact check of a comment that I heard.
Okay.
The idea of having the water go over the sidewalk, is that more water than normal would occur in a rainstorm?
So you can always do a curb cut to just pop up, core through the curb, pop up a drain right before the sidewalk to be up to code.
But no, I'm talking about in your experience.
Because
is that...
So no matter what you do, especially with these big rain events that we've had, you're gonna overflow. You're gonna fill up your system and it's gonna overflow. So the sidewalk is the appropriate place for that to happen, in my opinion, because it's going out to the street. So you can either, at my house, it's just going over the sidewalk, but a lot of jobs will just do a curb cut through the sidewalk and have it pop up.
My eldest brother, and if you know anything about relationships between siblings, my eldest brother is a retired general contractor, cum landscape architect. And he said to me, oh, you don't want to get water because the cost, saved rainwater, because the cost of the barrels is not cost efficient with the cost of water. So he's thinking about this only about economics, not thinking about the environment.
Absolutely.
What's your reaction?
He's right.
Okay.
If as soon as a husband, when I'm talking about these ideas, and I am one, so I can say it, as soon as a husband starts talking about ROI, I know it's not going to happen. Currently, our water that we get from the city for like, I don't know what the rate is, for 750 gallons, it costs you $3 or $4 or something like that. So now I'm designing you a $10,000 complicated rain capture system. You do it because it's the right thing to do, because you care, because your plants will like the water, and because I think the one perhaps weighty argument you can make against that is we don't know the future of our water availability.
It's like solar.
Right. So if you have a big system for decades, I think it might pay itself back up, pay itself off.
I've lived in my house for 40 years and I'm going to die of it.
Yeah. So, you know,
Don't do it anytime soon.
this is where
I have no control over that.
it's you do it because it's right, and this is where the other side of this calculation that I didn't really talk about is what are you growing? All right, if you have a lawn and fruit trees, is that 1,000 gallons going to get you very far? No. If you have a California native plant palette and succulents and a really low water lawn, then maybe you can, do a big cistern and get through the entire year. Especially with the native lawn or native plant palette for sure. But that's why I don't push these ideas too hard anymore. If someone comes to me from a thing like this because they know this is what I do, I'm all in. But I'll tell them, like, don't tease me. I will design you a cool system and I get excited about it. All right, I've put some really awesome things on paper that I'm so excited about. This is gonna be good. It's in my mind how the water's flowing through the property. We get the bid and that line item, first thing gets crossed off. Because, prices are crazy these days, right? So when you're looking at fences and retaining walls and plants and boulders and decks and patios and pergolas and all this stuff, and the bid comes in at some number that makes you sick to your stomach, you start looking, where are we going to shave? Usually the landscape lighting and the rain capture is the first thing to get pared down.
Well, I would be retrofitting my house.
Right.
Because I've been living in it for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I've got tree aloes in the front.
Yeah.
And I've got apricots and figs and stuff in the back.
Yeah.
So that what I'm doing, am I going to stay with traditional irrigation, or am I going to capture the massive amount of rain that falls on my property?
Yeah.
And what not minimal cost, but what amount of reasonable cost can I do to go away from traditional irrigation?
Absolutely, yeah. So a point I meant to say that is this is so site dependent. It is so project dependent, budget dependent, client dependent. What are the realities of your property? Some properties are really challenging because of where the garden is in relation to the house. Sometimes the garden's higher. Sometimes there's really easy opportunities. Wow, you have a downspout right next to your fruit tree orchard.
Well, I just had a complete new roof and complete new eave irrigation system put in.
Yeah.
So I have the whole mechanism for capturing water.
Yeah, so very site dependent, and that's where you can start to think about these concepts, or pay someone like me or Brooke to come out and do an evaluation. Yeah, Jim.
I didn't see any first flush systems on any of yours, and I had rainwater done about 15 years ago, and those are the failure point on all of mine. I mean, they need a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
Also, the odd thing was I was surprised, and it finally dawned on me, it's stupid. They had a filter on the exit, and I thought, I'm catching the dirty water. Why am I trying to keep it in the first flush system? I want it out of there. So I covered the filters a long time ago.
Yeah.
But still, but I didn't see any on there, and I was just curious, do you have a lot of silt problems without those?
So first flush system, for those of you who don't know, I do actually have one that was kind of hiding the picture of mine, and there was one on the graphic I showed from Brooke. But basically a first flush system, for those that don't know, there's the leaf feeder at the top that goes straight down into a 3 or 4 inch pipe. And then what happens is that first rain, all the bird poop and stuff coming off of your roof goes into that first flush system. It's a sediment catch. And then at the top of that first flush system, there's a pipe that goes over to your cistern. And that's basically every time it rains, you get 15 gallons maybe or something in that first flush system. Even when it's full, then supposedly the sediment goes down through there. But yeah, it gunks up at the bottom. It is the point that when I did tours, when I did that course with Brooke, we did maintenance tours, and no one was ever checking theirs. And even mine, when I do open it up, it's pretty nasty. So sediment in your system very much depends on what's overhead for the most part. If you have a lot of big trees overhead and your gutters are full of leaves, it's going to take a lot more maintenance to keep it clean. A couple layers of filters might be good, but it is something you have to check multiple times a winter if we're getting a lot of storms. With the smaller tanks, like that 200-gallon cistern or even my 500, me and my neighbor can move my 500 around pretty easily. So if you have like a 200, 300, 400-gallon tank, it can be your first flush system during the summer. You can pop it off, throw it in the garden and rinse it out. So first flush systems work from what I've seen if they are maintained. They're not particularly pleasant to maintain, but there's a lot of variables in there. Did that kind of answer your question?
Well, the other problem I had, I wonder if you have this with yours.
Yeah.
They were built with a small hole in the bottom, so what the deal is, the first flush fills with 3 gallons.
Yeah.
And then it slowly leaks out.
Yeah.
The problem is in San Diego, it doesn't rain hard enough.
Right.
You get the 3 gallons and it just sits there and it's coming out the same rate it's coming in, so you don't get any water in your tank.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out that's why in a lot of rains I didn't catch any water, because so I ended up putting valves on them all, so I could catch it when I wanted. I catch it and run it in a rain bucket or watering cans. I used to water my vegetables with it.
Exactly.
I get enough dew off of the roof to that.
Yeah.
So I still get all the dirty water, but I could not get those little ones that are not made for San Diego.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
They're the smallest hole filter I could find, but a pinhole was still faster than the rainfalls in San Diego.
Yeah. I have a valve on the bottom of mine, and
On yours too.
yeah, and so this is where it's another challenge of someone that designs these things is it's a rare client that you can rely on to do a lot of active maintenance. So you try to make them foolproof. But yeah, that first flush, I think they're important. If you do one without it, I don't think that's a big deal. You might just need to clean your tank out every couple of years. And that may take some help, a couple of people to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this question is coming from someone who might burst into tears.
Oh no.
I feel very overwhelmed. And from someone whose husband just put a hose from the rain gutter to the garbage can and
Yeah.
watered our house plants all year.
Yeah.
But so if you just simplify, really simplify,
Mhm.
like if you're looking in the front yard, it's raining and just digging gutters and you need new contouring as
Mhm.
part of the design.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to have, I mean, is this ignorant, you have a swale or
Mhm.
whatever it is, not dry creek, because there's a lot of big ugly ones that
Yeah.
drive around Poway and see.
Yeah.
And so the water would go from the roof into that, and it would
Absolutely. Yeah. So again,
and just stay in the ground, so your
yeah, absolutely.
trees that you hope to get planted would.
Absolutely. You plant the water. I like that. I love the phrase, you plant the water. So again, completely site dependent, budget dependent. If you're talking about earthworks, grading, moving soil around, creating berms, it can be a tricky thing to do in an established garden. It's a pretty invasive process once you really start digging things up. But absolutely, if grade is in your favor, if the land is sloping away from your house and you're going to simply just point your downspout there, and then you got to know where's that water going to go, because it's going to keep going. All right. Sometimes it's really easy. There's a clear path, like, oh, just do a little depression through here, maybe do a couple little check dams like I was talking about with a small little boulder to kind of hold some things together, and it's moving towards the street, moving towards a drain that's already there maybe. Sometimes you can find a way to get from the downspout to an existing drain without having to do too much work.
So like Andrea's, for example, I've never seen hers in person, but
Mhm.
the pictures always look fabulous.
Mhm.
So was that a huge, giant engineering project, or?
Hers was a pretty, so she has some, I think it's called like bioswale soil or something. She dug a really big hole, put some of that special soil that I know Encinitas specs in their BMP requirements, don't get me started on that, but she dug a big hole, put some of that special soil in there, put some rocks on top. It was a pretty big project. It's a small yard. I mean, big is relative.
Because I don't even know if it would make sense. We removed everything except 3 citrus trees and 2 hedges, or what do you want to call them, just for privacy. And people will take those out, put something else up. But so, and whatever's left is just things to be dug out, moved around. I have a lot of things in pots.
Yeah.
But I want to have plants before I die. I want to be able to go out and plant my strawberry tree.
Totally. So without seeing your property, it's hard to say what I would do if I was called out to a property like that. I would look at the reality of your situation, see what opportunities there are, low-hanging fruit, see what obstacles there are in terms of like, oh, well, this is actually higher over here than your garage or whatever, so we got to be careful. Or, it's really, you just kind of have to see, and then, talk about what budget you're comfortable with and what are your goals. Are you just want to sink a little bit of water for your low water trees, or are you trying to capture a bunch for your fruit tree orchard? There's no...
Yeah, there'll be no fruit trees. I found out I eat too much fruit, so now I...
Yeah, got it. Yeah, there's no one answer. These are a bunch of different concepts that can be applied in a bunch of different ways, and it is so site and client and budget dependent. Yes?
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I promise I won't talk about dying in this question. So, this is a really broad question. I know there's a lot of variables and the site specific and everything else, but just if you're looking at like 2 big, large cisterns versus, a really nicely designed swale check dam system and all that, which one gets you a bigger bang for your buck?
Ooh.
Typically.
Well, for your buck, I mean, you know, I like swales because if you talk about the bang with a swale is you get to build a bridge, you get some interesting topography to your garden. Yeah.
In terms of water.
In terms of water, yeah.
Which one gets you the biggest bang?
You know, if you're going big, they're probably pretty comparable. You know, I think it's going to be, to me, it's probably a question of what you're going to grow. Are you trying to make your garden survive through the summer off of your water capture? If that's really important to you and really reduce your year-round usage, I might push you towards cisterns. If you're looking to just have something that takes care of itself, that puts some water in the ground for a low water garden, I talk about swales. But yeah, purely by square feet, I have a lot more water in the ground at my house through the sunken lawn, through the swales in the back. But those, you know, there's big machines digging those holes and labor doing those. So those cisterns are expensive. The trenching pipe can be really expensive depending on where you're putting the cistern. If there's a really easy way where you have a giant side yard right next to a giant section of roof, and you can put a giant cistern there without having to like hide it from your neighbor or hide it from your kitchen window, and it's right there for the taking and it's really easy, then you might get more bang for your buck there. But if you have kind of a tighter property, but you have a really easy path where you could carve a little swale from the downspout to an existing drain, you might get some more bang for your buck there. But yeah, I think it also depends on the scope. If there's going to be machines on site and you're doing a big project, doing a little bit more grading, you might be easier to attain than bringing in the infrastructure for a giant cistern. So sorry, I don't know. Site dependent. Yeah.
I do have
Yeah.
one follow-up
Yeah.
comment on your ROI thing.
Yeah.
Because you hear this a lot with electric cars, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what's the payback period? You know,
Yeah.
I just want to, I'd say to people, well, what's the payback period on that Range Rover that you?
Exactly. Yeah.
$80,000
Exactly.
gas-powered Range Rover. I mean, what are we talking?
The other comeback I'm trialing on that hasn't really taken yet is that what else do you do in the garden that even has any ROI, right? Fruit trees, saves you a little bit of money on your grocery bill.
But the taste.
Yeah, you know, but you know, even if you're using some amount of water that you're capturing and it's reducing your water bill a little bit, I'm struggling to think of other things besides fruit production that you do in a garden that reduces your monthly expenditures at all. I think I have a sympathetic crowd here. It's not really flying in the field yet, but yeah.
And it produces every year.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you make the investment.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Just wanted to know, I noticed next to your sunken garden, you have a Dazzlerion.
Yeah.
And
Yucca.
how do you keep it from rotting? Mine gets too much water and then they rot, so I have to keep them dry. How do you control that, I guess?
So that Yucca rostrata, there's a little bit of a slope. If here's my sunken lawn and here's my neighbor's fence, there's a little bit of a slope there. And I have drip running through there that I run once this year. I'm doing once every 14 days. And so it doesn't get a lot of water. And I think the slope, because it's that the sunken lawn, the water that's going into the sunken lawn is below. It's not going to work its way back up. Right. Those roots may eventually, hopefully, find their way down there. But the water that's going into the ground from the sunken lawn is working its way down towards the street, from what I can tell.
Pretty.
Thank you.
It is pretty. All of us who've seen it.
Yes, sir.
So you do the design, engineering, and construction?
No, I'm purely a designer, and I outsource all the liability and headache to some very reliable colleagues. So I work with a ton of different builders. If you really want to do stuff like this, then that list of builders gets pretty small, because I have seen some absolutely mind-numbing things when I have builders who I don't know try to install these things. 2 times in the same week on a project 2 years ago, I had 2 different builders run a drain under a dry creek bed from the top all the way to the bottom, so that the water, I don't know, I can't explain how they thought this was the right thing to do. They just took the water from the top, ran it under the dry creek bed, and had it popped up below. 2 different builders. I said, what? So I started putting more ideas on paper. So yes, if I have a small list of builders who are very good at this stuff. Yes?
I was gonna say, when I see a designer's creek and the one you had on the garden tour, you know, because even how you put the rocks together, where you put each rock,
Yeah.
you know, and you've probably seen more horrible ones than
Yeah.
and even on garden tours sometimes.
Yeah.
And the rocks clash or the wrong shape there.
Yeah.
And so you could see it in the designer's garden.
Yeah.
But then the guy that comes and you're paying to do it, you know, he might be just randomly throwing rocks in there and not really placing each rock.
Absolutely. So I have crews that are very good at this, and they are more expensive than the crews that you can call and just find someone. The big bane of our existence as designers, there's always going to be a cheaper bid in landscape. We're going to refer you to someone that we can vouch for, and they pay their crew well so they can retain them. And they're going to be sometimes twice the cost as someone you can find on Yelp or something that's going to come and put your weed fabric everywhere and throw the rocks down in a nice little line and have it look horrible. It's tough. It's really hard. It's really hard. You know, I try to be as transparent as I can with these things and get a sense of how much money people are comfortable spending, but things just keep going up and up. These crews that are really good, they keep their people on staff. Those people get raises. So that bid that was $80,000 last year is $120,000 now. You know, it's expensive. These things, again, doing these things on a big scale, no illusions, it's expensive. But you can apply these simple concepts of water finding its lowest point in smaller ways. And that can be a little more challenging. It's easier for me to design your property from scratch than it is to come and be like, well, let's elbow a little thing in here and reverse engineer a little thing in there. That can be challenging. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.